Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're still looking at the mystery of August 16th, 1977. And we're following our fictional fan, Joyce, as she attempts to solve the mystery. For her, it's August 18th, 1977. And she's been reviewing a lot of newspaper articles with her friends. They're waiting for the funeral later in the day. They're going to go try to see the procession. But some of her friends have brought newspapers from all across the country, all around the world. Some of them have pictures and evidence of other items that they've gathered from other Elvis fans all around the world. People who loved Elvis and who know a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and they don't know whether what they know adds to the understanding of what happened on August 16th or not. But they've given it to other Elvis fans so that they can try to put it together and try to solve this mystery. Hi, Keith. Thank you so much for joining. TCB to you from Georgia. Keith is joining from New Jersey. So you're just in time because we're just now getting started. And before we start anything, I'm just going to announce that today is the 5-month anniversary of the channel. Very first video dropped April 2nd, 2025. So today is September 2nd. We've been on there for 5 months. Put out a lot of good information, things that people have never seen before. Very first video that went out was Elvis Presley's Grandpa Bob. It was about Gladys's father. And that video currently has 389 views. So I think it could get a lot more views if you're here for one of the first times joining us, just now learning about the channel. That's a good one to go and pick up and take a look at. It's a little rougher than some of my other videos, but you don't get to meet Grandpa Bob a lot of other places. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Marion. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here, too. We're just saying that it had just hit the 5-month channel anniversary. Just giving the channel a little bit of a pat on the back for lasting this long. We've got a lot of other great things coming, so a lot of growth ahead. And what we've seen so far has just been a taste. So the next thing we're going to get into is that before the headlines and before the hearse, there were 2 hearts and 1 chain and a gift of tenderness. And Elvis gave his fiancée, Ginger Alden, a simple, heartfelt gift sometime in the few months before he died. We're not exactly sure when, but I'm going to show that gift to you now. And Keith is saying that he strongly believes Alden let some time lapse between Elvis going down and her calling downstairs. God only knows what she was doing up there. Well, we don't know yet, Keith, because we haven't got that far into the archive. Being only August 18th, nothing has really come out about Ginger, other than that she was there. But so far, everybody believes that Joe Esposito found the body. Now, of course, we're going to learn differently as we go forward. But we're also going to see some things that you've never seen before, that weren't in any books. They weren't on TV. They weren't in the movies. They haven't been in any magazines or newspapers. And some of those things are like what's on screen right now. And this is a little gold anklet. And you can see the initials EP, and you can see the 2 hearts. And Elvis gave this to Ginger. And it's a 24-karat gold anklet featuring these 2 merged hearts with an E and a P against an open back. Each heart is about a 1/2 inch tall. And the fact that they are his initials, this gives it importance because he has given her something of himself. And then when she eventually sold this at auction, she included a letter of authentication. She added some provenance, which was a letter of authenticity. And this piece sold for $6,084 about 2-3 months ago in June of 2025. So it's been fairly recent. And that's one of the reasons you will have never seen it before. But what it shows, but this gift that Elvis gave to his fiancée Ginger shows is that she mattered and that he chose her. And in those final months, he was giving her not just jewelry, but intimacy. There are no diamonds on this. There are no fancy jewels. There's no adornment of any kind, really, other than his initials and the 2 hearts. So it's extremely simple. He obviously could have afforded to give her something far more elegant and expensive than this. But he had this specially made, because it's got the E and the B, to give to her, and he chose to make it look this simple. He stripped it of his own iconography, other than his initials, and he's offering it as love, not just as a performance like he does on stage to so many of his fans, but as a presence just for Ginger. It's just gold and gravity. He didn't adorn this piece. He exposed himself to Ginger through it. He used it to bring the 2 of them closer. Now, did it really bring them closer? I can't say that. I can only show you the piece, and we know that Elvis, this piece is not an Elvis typical piece. He typically goes for a lot more flash. So there's a reason that he went this simple. And Terry's saying that a lot of people blame Ginger for Elvis dying, but I don't see it. She is a lovely lady. And that's one of the things we're going to bring out during this series, is we're going to make our own determinations about Ginger. We're not going to rely on what's been said about her in the past by other people. What's been given out in timelines by people that we know were not exactly trustworthy. We've already seen that even the most trustworthy that we know of hasn't told the absolute truth during this 3-day period. And this is the first 3 days. So it's possible that everything we know about Ginger is completely wrong, but we don't know. And that's why we're going to go through it and look at all this source material. And one of these pieces of source material is this anklet. Okay, it's not a document, but it has meaning. It's 24 karat gold. It's pure. It's untarnished. And the reason that you choose gold to give to people as a symbol of love is that it does not tarnish. It never tarnishes. It's a circle because it's an anklet. Obviously, you could take it on and off, but in its true form, it's a circle, and that's an unbroken circle. It's a loop of love. And it links Ginger to Elvis, to the myth, and to the man. And Marion's saying that she agrees with Terry, and Terry's saying it's just his opinion, and that's right, we've all got an opinion here. And let me give my daily disclaimer that I am not an expert. I am just a guy who finds stuff about Elvis, and I bring it to the channel here, and we all talk about it, and we all have an opinion, and everybody's opinion is welcome. And a lot of people have Keith's opinion. A lot of people believe that, and there were books that were published which support that opinion. So I totally understand where it comes from. And I've often said that I try not to have opinions anymore, because as we find more and more of the source material, my opinions are forced to change every time. So it's easier just to approach it all as if I don't know anything and then just accept the material as it comes in, as long as I can make it jive with Elvis. You know, sometimes we see things that in our heart, it doesn't line up with Elvis. That's the ones we really have to question the most. And that's another thing that I'm trying to bring out on the series here. But combined with Ginger's letter, this anklet becomes more than mere metal. It's not a document, but it is a memory. It's a witness to their love. Now, I don't know if that was a returned love. Obviously, she kept the gift. But it seems to have certainly been love on Elvis's part, or a statement that he wanted her to know him as a person without all the flash, without all the symbols and the different things that he had to do to maintain his image, that he wanted her to know him as a person, not as the image. And that's why he gave her this very simple piece that she would wear and perhaps have him with her all the time. Because this is one of those pieces that you might wear all the time. All right, now we're going to switch over and we're going to watch some video. And this is a video I've tried multiple times to show us. I believe I've got it fixed this time. I appreciate you guys for hanging in here with me as we try it each time. We're going to try it again. We're going to see if we can get it to work for us. Got a little bit of a problem. Hang on just a second for me. Okay. Nope. Nope. Even though I tested it again, and now it is wrong again. All right, back to the drawing board with that one. But let's move on to the next part. This is a picture of a Stutz, and it was in the same newspaper that we were looking at yesterday, the Herald. And so it doesn't have anything to do directly with Elvis, but because it was in that same newspaper, I found it really interesting because it's a Stutz. And my little symbol is covering it up. So let me look here. Okay. What it says is this Stutz convertible sells for $129,000. And that was in 1977. $129,000. And more if you want mink covered floors. The car is shown during its unveiling last year. So this would have been a car that Elvis might have coveted. He loved Stutzes. He had a few. He tended to get them in darker colors. This one appears to be white. But this kind of gives you the price of what he was paying for this kind of automobile. Somewhere around $100,000, which even today is a lot of money for an automobile. But back then, that was more than what Graceland cost when he bought it. All right. Now, this is a picture of the outside of Graceland, probably on the 17th. And there's a child that's pretty hot, got overcome with some heat exhaustion, and is being helped out by a guy in a Red Cross uniform. And I believe the guy in the white shirt might be his father. But you can also see the size of the crowd, and they've had to put up the police barriers. It just gives you an idea of what it looked like outside of Graceland during this 2-3 day period. All right, this lady is Molly Ivins, and she wrote Elvis's obituary for the New York Times. And this obituary got sent all around the world. And it's probably the most famous obituary that's out there. It's where most of the others culled their information from. And it's fairly lengthy because it gives an entire biography of Elvis. But what I've said in the past when we've come across these articles that have the biographies is that I've skipped them because they're mostly wrong. And they just add confusion to the archive. But in this case, I think I'm going to read the whole thing out because it's a beautiful time capsule of what basically everybody thought was Elvis at this time. There's probably a better biography if you read Jerry Hopkins, but it wasn't up to the moment in 1977, which hers is going to kind of catch us up through that. And of course, it was a full book, so it wasn't as condensed as this one, although this one is a few pages long. But this gives you a good idea of what even Elvis fans would have thought about Elvis at the time, how they would have seen his life, what was known about him publicly. And a lot of the early stuff it's basically the Colonel Parker machine has pumped out this information, and there's been some rumor and speculation added to it and then mixed together a little bit, and that's pretty much what we see for the early days of Elvis. And then as we close into the 1970s, it becomes more and more of a tabloid type thing where the official word that came out of the Colonel and Elvis, they could no longer as tightly control the media as they used to. And it's less to do with their own capabilities and more to do with the way the media became in the 1970s. In the 1950s, it was a fairly controllable entity. You kind of made gentlemen's agreements between everybody as to when they would have access and the kind of things that they would print. And when they said things were off the record, they typically were off the record. That kind of starts to disappear in the 1960s, and by the 1970s, it's a wild, wild west of journalism. So I'm going to start to read this. And we'll get an idea here of how she presented Elvis in her article. Okay. So this article is titled Elvis Presley Dies, Rock Singer Was 42. And heart failure cited by coroner, acclaim followed scorn. Elvis Presley, the first and greatest American rock and roll star, died yesterday at the age of 42. Mr. Presley, whose throaty baritone and blatant sexuality redefined popular music, was found unconscious in the bedroom of his home, called Graceland, in Memphis yesterday at 2:30 p.m. He was pronounced dead an hour later at Baptist Memorial Hospital after doctors failed to revive him. Dr. Jerry Francisco, the Shelby County coroner, who conducted a 2-hour examination of the body, said preliminary autopsy findings indicated that the cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, which a hospital spokesman defined as an irregular and ineffective heartbeat. The coroner was not immediately able to determine the cause of the cardiac arrhythmia. Mr. Presley was once the object of such adulation that teenage girls screamed and fainted at the sight of him. He was also denounced for what was considered sexually suggestive conduct on stage. Preachers inveighed against him in sermons, and parents forbade their children to watch him on television. In his first television appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, his act, which might be thought of as tame by today's standards, was considered by the broadcasters to be so scandalous that the camera showed him only from the waist up, lest his wiggling hips show. And so what's interesting about that paragraph is that it's showing that in just Elvis's lifetime, things had changed so much that what he did that was considered scandalous when he was 20 was no longer considered scandalous when he passed away at 42, just 22 years later. Now, looking back on it, it's been 50 years since he passed away, but it's been, or almost 50 years, and it's been even longer, almost 70 since he started. And so, yeah, we would say today that, yeah, the standards were far different, but the standards had changed dramatically in just those 20 years, and he had helped to change them. And Keith is saying David Brinkley, in my opinion, did the worst reporting of EP passing away on national TV. Badly done. Yeah, I'd probably agree a lot with that, Keith. And what happened there was the night that he passed away, because they announced it so late in the day, there was not enough time to prep the television broadcast. So there was no time to get in any new material or new video or anything like that. So they had to go with what they had in the archives. So some stations determined not to even show anything. David Brinkley's station decided to show something, and then he had to kind of make it fly. But obviously he wasn't an Elvis fan, so he didn't do the best job available. Mr. Presley, back to this article. Mr. Presley's early hit songs are an indelible part of the memories of anyone who grew up in the 50s. Hound Dog, Heartbreak Hotel, and Blue Suede Shoes were teenage anthems, like Frank Sinatra in the decade before, and the Beatles a decade later. Mr. Presley was more than a singer, he was a phenomenon, with 45 gold records that sold more than 1 million copies each. Mr. Presley was a show business legend before he was 25. At the age of 30, he was the highest paid performer in the history of the business. He made 28 films, virtually every one of them frivolous personality vehicles, and nearly all of them second-rated at best, but they gross millions. So she does not like his movies. She felt that his movies were something of a waste of time. I'm not sure that that's true, but that is a popular opinion about the movies. And Honolulu Elvis fan, thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Honolulu saying the only show that he was filmed only from the waist up was the last Ed Sullivan show. Ed Sullivan, I'm having a hard time pronouncing things today. Was the last Ed Sullivan show. All previous TV appearances were not censored. And that's true. So there is this huge myth about how he was censored on television that just isn't true. But it doesn't match into the myth that people want to be able to tell about Elvis. Elvis doesn't fit into a soundbite. And that's something that a lot of people don't like. And he doesn't fit neatly into a small biography. And people don't like that either, because they want to smash him into a small biography. Now let's go back to this small biography that we're reading right now. The other thing that she said here was that everybody heard Hound Dog, Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes. So she's saying exactly what we've seen reflected in all the newspaper articles, that people grew up with Elvis, they loved him, and they're rushing to the stores to try to buy up Elvis Presley songs and memorabilia. In recent years, Mr. Presley, who used to carry about 175 pounds on a 6-foot frame, had been plagued with being overweight. A recently published book called Elvis What Happened by 3 of his former bodyguards alleged that the singer was given to using amphetamines. So this is like her, she gives like one sentence to this Elvis What Happened, which is kind of nice. And she always is calling Elvis Mr. Presley, which I also find very nice and respectful. We've seen a lot of newspaper articles that aren't nearly as nice as this. And she does not give a weight for what he is at the time of death. We've seen some newspapers claim he was 245 or more pounds. But she only gives the 175 pounds. That was basically his weight in the army. And then it says history of mild hypertension. Dr. Francisco said yesterday that Mr. Presley had a history of mild hypertension and that he had found evidence of coronary artery disease. Both of these, the coroner said, could have been contributing causes in Mr. Presley's death, but the specific cause may not be known for a week or two pending lab studies, he said, adding, it is possible in cases like this that the specific cause will never be known. And Marion saying that she likes many of the Elvis movies, and if I had to choose only one to take with me, I would definitely choose Elvis Presley. So yeah, I think that the movies are again part of the myth that he didn't like them, that they were all bad, that they were. I don't think any of that's true. I think if we look very closely at the movies, we see that Elvis lived out a lot of his dreams in the movies. Little dreams, things that he'd wanted to do, like to be a race car driver or to fly a plane or to be a doctor. He got to do all of these things in the movies. Were they the best vehicles of all time to be that particular character? No. But they had massive impact on the television shows that came after. So, like, if you look at his doctor from his last movie with Mary Tyler Moore, Change of Habit, his doctor character suddenly shows up like in every television show for the next 20 years. There's somebody that's very close to that doctor, and I think it culminates with George Clooney in ER in the early 90s. But there's always got this slick, cool, got his hair done well, young doctor who I don't think prior to that any of us associated that archetype with being a doctor. Most of us would have seen a doctor as somebody more like the guy on Little House on the Prairie, or an older, rounder, heavy-set gentleman, or extremely thin but old, is I think mostly how we would see a doctor, a guy who wears glasses, not the sex symbol that Elvis was in that particular movie. And Keith says that, yet the doctor didn't mention that someone dumped his stomach contents. I bet Vernon probably did. Well, Vernon wasn't there when they did the autopsy, so I don't know if he dumped the stomach contents or not. And he doesn't mention that, but he doesn't mention a lot of specifics about the autopsy at this point. So, yes, that's coming. And it's good that you've read ahead on it. But we haven't got there. I am going to be interested when we get there to get more and more opinions on what we think was going on with the stomach. And Chillin' in Canada, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Says, I hope he knew that he brought so much fun to a generation of 70s kids through his movies. Yeah, I don't think he did. I don't think he really understood the people who are watching the movies on television. Although he did know he was reaping money from it, because the Colonel made really good deals to show those movies on television. So those movies, not only did they make him a bunch of money the year he made them, they made money like forever for him, just like they do today. And that money came to him. But I'm not sure that he realized, when you put out a movie, one of the things that Elvis was doing was he was there at the right moment in time that all of this technology converged. And at the very moment that Elvis became famous, the world was changing from radio to television. And home recordings were changing from 78 RPM records to 45 RPMs, which were RCA's special thing. They made the 45 RPM. So RCA really needed this 45 RPM thing to succeed. And Elvis, even though they didn't know it when they bought his contract, he's the one that made that succeed. So 45s became the dominant format for a long time. They were the ones that dominated because of the jukeboxes and because they were cheaper to buy as singles than a full EP or LP. These singles dominated the market. Plus, that's actually what they were playing on the radios. And then everybody moved into these tapes and stuff. Well, Elvis was there, and all his stuff got reformatted into the tapes and sold again. So he makes more and more money, right? And into the 8-tracks and eventually into the CDs long after he's gone. But this happens with the movies as they transition to television. And the reason he wanted to get into records was that it had huge distribution and people got to know him. And that's why he needed to be with RCA so that they could distribute worldwide. And that's what brought him the fame and got him into everybody's house. Radio did that, but it only did it regionally. So when he started on the radio, he only became famous in his area. And then as he spread out of the area, other radio stations played him. But the records, not through Sam Phillips because he didn't have the reach, but with RCA, eventually reached the entire world. So he had that audience that was kind of built in. Then he goes to the movies, and the movies have an even bigger audience than what the record sales do. And then they drive the record sales, and then the records drive the movies to go see the movies. So these two were very synergistic, and they brought him a lot of what we would think of today as views if this was the YouTube world. But then Colonel allows these movies to be reshown on television, and television reaches everyone. It's no longer a matter of numbers, it's a matter of vast numbers so much larger than anything the movies or radio or records ever reach, that this comment about the 70s kids is absolutely true, because suddenly every kid knew Elvis, not just all the kids that wanted to, or all the kids in the area that heard him on the radio, or all the kids that went to the movies, but every kid, because almost every kid had access to a TV. By the 1970s, there's usually one per household. And Honolulu is saying that Vernon wasn't there. Yeah, that's true. Vernon was at home, so he was not there for the autopsy. And Marion saying, is it even possible to watch it as a non-doctor? Marion, it could have been possible, but not at Baptist. No, if you go to a teaching hospital, yeah, it's possible that they've got a gallery, and you can watch from the gallery as a student, and sometimes as a guest, but that wouldn't have been the case at Baptist. And Honolulu saying no contamination would have been a concern. Right, nobody would have been in the operating room, but in certain places you're able to observe, but not. I don't believe Baptist was a teaching hospital, so no, that wouldn't have been possible. But the people that were in there were nurses, other doctors, George Nicopolis, Dr. Francisco. But during the autopsy itself, it would have been Dr. Francisco, George Nicopolis. I believe there was 2 other doctors that were in there. I can't remember for sure. And there were probably maybe a nurse, but you don't normally use a nurse for an autopsy. But hopefully we'll get some more information on that and we'll get deeper into that. Well, I've gotten us way off track. So let me return to our article where we're talking about mild hypertension. A hospital spokesman said that the coroner is required by law to conduct an examination if the case of death is not immediately apparent. So they're giving that as the reason that they did the autopsy. And responding to repeated questions about whether the autopsy had revealed any signs of drug abuse, the coroner said the only drugs he had detected were those that had been prescribed by Mr. Presley's personal physician for hypertension and a blockage of the colon, for which he had been hospitalized twice in 1975. So this is, the notable thing here is probably blockage of the colon. We've heard the other parts before, and they are in line with what we've heard. But the blockage of the colon, we've always heard that as twisted colon. I think we heard it one other way, but I can't recall the words now. But blockage of the colon, I think back then they were thinking that your colon would get twisted and then it would get blocked, which maybe that's true. I don't know. But I don't think that was the case here. I think he just had a history of his colon did not work properly. And at this point, it was not working and had blocked up. But it's notable here because we don't see this language in all the newspaper articles. Dr. George Nicopolis, Mr. Presley's personal physician, told the Associated Press that Mr. Presley was last seen alive shortly after 9 a.m. Dr. Nicopolis said that Mr. Presley had taken a number of appetite depressants, but the physician said they had not contributed to his death. So this appetite depressants comes up over and over. And I don't think we've actually seen the medication that is the appetite depressant yet, but it indicates to me that it's an amphetamine, because I believe that's what an appetite depressant normally is. Elvis Aaron Presley was born in a two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi on January 8, 1935. During his childhood, he appeared with his parents, Gladys and Vernon Presley, as a popular singing trio at camp meetings, revivals, and church conventions. So I don't think here on this channel we've really talked about Gladys and Vernon and Elvis singing as a trio at camp meetings, revivals, and church conventions. Camp meetings, I believe, is another, it's kind of like revivals, it's another religious event. The family moved to Memphis when Mr. Presley was 13. He attended L.O. Humes High School and worked as an usher in a movie theater. After graduation, he got a job driving a truck for $35 a week. In 1953, Mr. Presley recorded his first song, paid $4 for the privilege. He took home one copy and played it over and over. So this in one paragraph condenses a whole lot of Elvis's life. And there's a few myths that are represented here and started, or that are reflected that the public believe. One of them is the working as an usher in a movie theater. Yeah, that's true. He did that. He also had some other jobs. And then after graduation, he got a job driving as a truck for $35 a week. That is true, but it was after he worked at a few other jobs. In 1953, Mr. Presley recorded his first song, paid $4 for the privilege. That's probably the biggest myth. There's this huge belief that he paid this $4, but nobody has ever shown any actual proof that he paid the $4. Now, what does exist is a couple of pieces of documentation that indicate he paid more like $8.95 or something closer to $10. But the $4, which a lot of myths are built on, and the reason that I think the $4 shows up here is it's in a flyer that the Memphis Recording Service published. And so the flyer has like 20 different prices on it for different services. And one of those prices looks like the thing that we think Elvis got, and it says $4. Okay, but what's not as clear here is that these flyers were more like an enticement to come into the store. And once you got there, then they were going to make a deal with you. And you were going to, pay a certain price for what you wanted. And the $4, it's not clear from the flyer whether it really covers both sides of the record. Or maybe it's just one side. Or whether you even get to walk away with the record. It's, maybe you just get to record. I'll show it to you someday and we'll look at it. But it's not, I don't want to call it bait and switch. But the purpose of a flyer is to get people to the person that's selling the product, which would be Sam or Marion. And then they're going to work out with you specifically what you want, because it's not really a one service cuts all deal. And that's why there's like 20 different services that they're offering to do all this different recording. So there's a couple of other receipts from other times that some people claim are fabrications, but they're weird fabrications if they are. And they both agree on the price, but this $4 doesn't. Now, the other thing about the $4 is that it has a mythic resonance with the $4 that was the check dollar amount that Vernon went to jail for. So the $4, it's easy to remember within the myth because it matches another piece of the myth, right? So there's a resonance. So people like to talk about this $4. And as you can see, it's reflected within this article, as we're talking about right now. And it's reflected in a lot of stuff you've read. And a lot of people believe that this $4 thing, this detail, is the correct detail, and they never question it. But I think it's well worth questioning because it changes multiple interpretations of the story. And I'll tell you something else that's interesting about this piece. And I'm going on way too long about a lot of this. We'll probably only get through this article if we make it through it at all. But and this is more stuff that I don't have any proof to show you at this minute. It's just things that I'm kind of throwing out there that we will eventually get to and discover together. But Peter Goralnik wrote this book about Sam Phillips. And it's a wonderful book. I definitely would recommend that you read the Sam Phillips book. It is amazing. He puts a lot of detail in it. Peter met Sam many times personally, spent a lot of time with him. He met Marion Keisker personally, spent a lot of time with her. Peter is a very nice man. Peter is someone that I would really like to know personally, I think. He's just a very nice guy. He is kind of a huge fanboy for Elvis and Sam Phillips and the whole period. So I think he does look at things with a little bit of rosy glasses, but he interprets things in a very nice way. And he spent a lot of time with Marion, and Marion told him at one point, because they were talking about this story about Elvis coming in and getting the $4 record and exactly how it happened and how she remembered to tell Sam later. And she finally looks at Peter and says, I've told this story so many times over the last however many years it is that I'm no longer sure what the real story is. Sometimes I think it's this way, and sometimes I think it's this other way, and sometimes I read it from somebody else and I think, I got it all wrong. So those aren't her exact words, but that was the gist of what she was saying, which I thought was so beautiful because it explains human memory, which is fallible and not perfect. And we remember things the way we wish to remember them. And for Marion, yes, she saw Elvis Presley one day come in and get this record, but for her, it was just another day. And it turns out that wasn't the only time Elvis was in the office. So if you think back over all the days you've ever worked in an environment that was exactly the same as the day before and the day after, if something unusual happened, the same person came 3 or 4 different times, would you maybe blend all that into one memory? I mean, maybe. Would you remember it all exactly correctly? I'm sure you wouldn't. So that's what Marion was trying to tell to Peter, that yes, she's told this story so many times and people have depended on her word, and that she worries at night about whether it's really even the right story, because she suddenly thinks that maybe it was a different way because she can't remember herself. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you being here. And now let's get back to this article so we can hopefully get through it. A shrewd song promoter called Colonel Thomas A. Parker was impressed by the early records and took over the management of Mr. Presley's career. Mr. Presley toured in rural areas under the sobriquet. I don't think I can even pronounce that properly. But it means nickname of the Hillbilly Cat. And that's a great quote for this channel, the Hillbilly Cat. And if you're enjoying this channel and you're having fun today, hit that like button, subscribe, tell people that you know that love Elvis about the channel so that we can have more people who love Elvis here listening to the stories, sharing with us their own thoughts and opinions, and comment and chat. Comment and chat as much as you can, because that's what the YouTube algorithm loves. So Mr. Presley toured in rural areas and they called him the Hillbilly Cat. And Colonel Parker, a character of P.T. Barnum proportions. P.T. Barnum was the guy that ran Barnum and Bailey's Circus, eventually combined with the Ringling Brothers to make the greatest show on earth. But he also had a giant elephant named Jumbo. Almost everybody in the world remembers Jumbo, who is really somewhat of a character that they spoofed for Dumbo in the Disney flicks. So Jumbo has been remembered forever. And also Colonel Tom Thumb, who P.T. Barnum helped create and make famous. But that's who they're comparing Colonel Parker to. And he followed the credo, don't explain it, just sell it. And he once observed, this is a quote from Colonel Parker apparently, quote, I consider it my patriotic duty to keep Elvis up in the 90% tax bracket, end quote. And he's referring to if you earn more than a certain amount of money at that point in time, the amount you made over that certain point was taxed at the 90th percentile. And we'll talk about a lot more about what that means at some point in the future. It's all very confusing financial stuff. And Marion's saying that she always writes down the important things like doctor's visits and stuff. And Emma's saying that she has reminders everywhere. And when Colonel Parker went to negotiate with 20th Century Fox on a film deal that would be Mr. Presley's screen debut, the studio executives dwelled on the singer's youth and inexperience. One executive finally asked, would $25,000 be all right? And Colonel Parker replied, that's fine for me. Now, how about the boy? So a lot of people don't like Colonel Parker, but in this little story that she just told, well, he stood up for Elvis. He said $25,000. Yeah, that's about half of what you're going to need, if not even too little. And then Heartbreak Hotel, Mr. Presley's first song hit, was released by RCA in January in 1956. A blood-stirring dirge about love and loneliness that burned up the jukeboxes and eventually sold 2 million copies. A phenomenal string of hit songs followed. An Elvis Presley fan club sprouted all over the world. Membership at one time numbered 400,000 people. Now, I wonder where they got that number 400,000 from. That'd be interesting to know, right? In 1957, he went to Hollywood to make his first film. This is the one they were just talking about, Colonel Parker negotiating. Love Me Tender. It opened to unanimous jeers from the critics and grossed between 5 and 6 times what it cost to make. His later films were conducted equally obnoxious. One critic remarked of Jailhouse Rock that Mr. Presley had been sensitively cast as a slob. Mr. Presley responded, "That's the way the mop flops." So Elvis just rhymed to whatever this guy had said, really to show that it didn't matter to him in any way what these critics would say. And then drafted into the Army in the spring of 1958. Mr. Presley was drafted into the Army as a private, an event that caused as much stir as an average Super Bowl. The Pelvis, as he was known, was stationed in West Germany for 2 years and was given an ecstatic welcome home by his fans. In 1967, Mr. Presley married Priscilla Ballou, the daughter of an Air Force colonel. They met during his military service and had a daughter named Lisa Marie, born on February 1st, 1968. Although concrete details of their private life remain sketchy through his deliberate design, the fan magazines were full of reports of marital difficulties, and the couple separated in February 1972. They were divorced in Santa Monica, California in 1973. So they wrapped up Priscilla in basically one paragraph, which is interesting because of the role that she went on to play. Mr. Presley was said to have been a shy person and rarely granted interviews. He seems to have been scarred by some of the early, heavy publicity and returned from his stint in the Army more withdrawn than he had been. Now, I don't know if that's true at all. I've got a whole slew of magazine articles that he did in the 60s, and we've even read one on the channel where he says, "I want to live to be old." So did he withdraw when he came back? I don't think that's true at all. This is just one of these lines that people stick in, and it starts these myths. And then she goes on to maybe give some support for what she said. In the early 60s, he made no personal or even television appearances. Well, that's not really true either, because he went to Hawaii and he raised money for the Arizona, and I gave a concert over there. That's definitely a personal appearance, and I know he did at least one more. So, and he did the television show right when he got back with Frank Sinatra, where it was "Welcome Home, Elvis," and he's got the giant hair. So this is not a well-researched portion of the article. In the early 60s, he made no personal or even television appearances, but earned $5 million a year simply by cutting a few records and making 3 movies a year. Simply by doing 3 movies a year. You know, how many people were doing 3 movies a year in Hollywood at that time? Let me give you a quick, almost nobody. There were a few, but none of them were the leading men. How many leading men were doing 3 movies a year? Really none. They could pump movies out quick, but I don't think even John Wayne in his prime was pumping out 3 feature films a year. Now, early on, when he was doing Republic films, like really cheap films, yeah, they were pumping them out. And you get a dozen a year, but of these feature films, of the quality and caliber and budget that Elvis was doing, yeah, no, nobody else is doing this 3 a year. So there's no simply anything here, because even those that might have been matching him in the movie side, they weren't putting out any records, and certainly not as many records as he was, and certainly not ones that were selling as well as his. So no simple about it. And there were many people that tried to copy the formula, and it did not work for them. This only worked for Elvis. And Keith is saying the Sinatra comeback, yep, and the EP sold a yacht for Danny Thomas, with his children's house. Well, he sold a yacht to Danny Thomas, and Danny wasn't very happy about it because he didn't really want to buy it, but then Elvis didn't really want it in the first place either. It was the Colonel's idea. So that one really is a great example of the Colonel in action. And I'm not sure what he was thinking at the time, but he did get a lot of publicity out of it. I don't know if he got enough to make it worth it. In the 70s, Mr. Presley appeared with some frequency in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the nightclubs. Well, that's not true either, is it? He showed up in one hotel. It wasn't a nightclub. It was the main theater, the showroom. It was not a nightclub. They did serve dinner there for one of the shows. But no, Elvis never appeared with any frequency or at all in any nightclub in Las Vegas, Nevada in the 1970s. Now, he went to some shows at a couple of nightclubs, but he did not perform there. So again, I would not agree with this sentence. Although he sometimes appeared bloated, he was still an excellent showman. An audience always loved him. In his nightclub act, again, it's not a nightclub act. It was a main performance. I mean, it was not a nightclub act. He would occasionally parody himself. Quote, "This lip used to curl easier," he would joke, referring to his one-time trademark of singing with a sneer. And yes, he did make that joke a couple times. And Keith's saying, I always wondered if he would have gone on to be in A Star Is Born. My personal feeling on A Star Is Born is that it would have been a terrible, terrible decision for Elvis to be in that. And you only have to look at... there's another famous movie out of the 80s that I'm forgetting now the name of, but it was directed by the same guy, Peters, who was really a hairdresser. And the whole thing would have been terrible for him for a lot of different reasons. So one day I'll get into that. I might do a whole special episode about it. Because a lot of people feel that because this is what kills me too, is that it's really Red and Sonny and maybe Dave that say that he was so excited about this. And if he had done it, it would have brought him back from wherever he was. Well, if you've been following the channel, wherever he was created by his physical condition. And there's no going back. Had nothing to do with drug abuse. It had to do with his body was failing. And by 1973, I think, which is when they're talking about, he would have been pretty far down the road. So he would have been in a lot of pain a lot of the time. He would have really needed to take the medications, even if he was not using them to get high. He quickly understood that the amount of money Barbra Streisand was offering was not enough to make the whole deal run. That Elvis needed a certain amount of money to make his operations run. He's running a business. He's the CEO of an empire. He's not just an actor waiting for his next job. He has to pay people. He can't pay these people on what Barbara wants to cut the deal at. So, the Colonel gives her the standard deal. She says no. People say that the Colonel gave her some inflated deal or whatever. No, he gave her the standard deal. This would have been the deal that he would have offered to anyone that came to him with an idea for a movie, any studio that he'd already worked with. And then they would have negotiated. Elvis would not have got what the Colonel asked for, because that's how negotiations work. But the story that we hear is that here's what was asked for, but we don't really know what was negotiated because no negotiations went on. And I think it's because Elvis could see immediately that he no longer wanted to do this project. It wasn't what he thought it was the night he was thinking, that she offered it to him. It was great fun and a lot of fun to talk about with her. But then Red and Sonny, it's their theory that this would have been great for him. And the same people that hate Red and Sonny then use this justification for Red and Sonny for why he should have done the movie, which I find hilarious. But I think there's just a lot. It's just so deep that I've never seen it. It's like the 1973 sale of the copyright stuff. It's It's much, much deeper and more complex than anybody's covered on YouTube or in a book or anywhere else yet. Let's go back to the article. Well, we're actually going to have to cut it off there for today, guys, because we've reached our hour. Keith, thank you so much for your questions. And I do apologize, I got so far off topic with everybody else, but I hope everyone found it interesting. We've got more of this article to go through so that it can help us understand where people were thinking about, how they thought about Elvis Presley in 1977. And that will tell us some of why they believe some of the things that came out in the newspapers and such, and how they eventually got past any of this as we get further and further into the timeline. We're still on August 18th, 1977, so we haven't made it very far yet. Had a lot of episodes, but we've only made it really not even 2 full days into the timeline. It'll start going really quick once we get past like this first few days, because then the news cycles start to stretch out, and then it becomes when people are publishing things or showing up on TV. So we'll start running through the years, but right now we're still in this early stage. And I appreciate everybody that came, stuck with me for today, and heard me out, and I hope everybody learned something and enjoyed themselves. And until the next time that I see you guys, I'll tell you what I always do, which is to keep on taking care of business.